So we're here with the director behind Equity, Meera Menon. And Meera, this is interesting how this whole kind of project came about. It's the start of Broad Street as well, the production company. How did you first encounter this? Was it through Amy's script? I mean, how did this all come about?
So Alicia Reiner, who's one of the producers and stars of the film, and her producing partner Sarah Megan Thomas, they've co-founded Broad Street Pictures. But Alicia had reached out to me vis-a-vis a producer friend that we just had in common, because they were specifically looking for a female director to bring on to the project, and they had been developing the project with Amy Fox, the screenwriter, for about 6 months before they started seriously looking for a director, or maybe before they seriously found one. Maybe they were looking for one the whole time. I'm not quite sure about that part of the story. You can ask her, but yeah. So they approached me about it. I had done one tiny independent feature prior to this, but it had gotten some buzz a little bit around the festival circuit, and just kind of had been really involved in the scene, specifically in a community of female directors, independent film directors. And so was looking for that second feature. They reached out to me with this script. I read it. I loved Amy's script. I loved the quality of the writing, the tone of it. Felt really excited by the possibilities of, like, a kind of in a filmmaking sense, the opportunity to make a film that felt like precise and intentional and had like a kind of an edge to it, a kind of that kind of slow drone of anxiety that kind of like keeps the film moving forward. It all compelled me on a filmmaking level. It felt like an opportunity to make a David Fincher film, basically, because my first film was a comedy, so this was very different, but I really responded to it on a thematic level and just the opportunity on a filmmaking level. And so when I read it, I got really excited and just put together a lot of material to present to them as to like how I would really kind of bring script to screen, and they vibed on what I said, and it just kind of all moved forward from there.
Cool. And you were talking about that festival run. I mean, your film originally was a Tribeca find, if I'm not mistaken.
My first film was a Tribeca find. Yeah, exactly. It was a small film that I wrote with a dear friend of mine from college, and made with a bunch of friends of mine from film school for like no money. But Tribeca premiered it very generously and awarded us a prize in Nora Ephron's memory. She had just passed away earlier that year, so they were trying to commemorate her in this way, and they wanted to give an award to a female filmmaker from that festival that had done original work, like a work they found to be original. And so that giving us that award and premiering at that festival kind of was the first thing that kind of put my name a bit out there as a director.
It was very cool. Yeah. I'm kind of curious, when you're talking about getting your portfolio ready for presenting to them, what were you inspired by? What did you want the film to look like in your mind?
Yeah, I mean, definitely David Fincher's films really came to mind. Michael Mann's films, a kind of contemporary noirs. Michael Clayton was another film that kind of felt like a relevant touch point. So The Social Network was a kind of touchstone. And The Social Network was a film I brought up to them that they had already been immediately kind of thinking about in terms of tone and genre. And then I just really looked for, just images that communicated the possibilities on a fashion sense, on the level of fashion, because I thought, you have all these movie references, but when you kind of have women spearheading them, when you have women at the forefront, there's an entirely new kind of set of possibilities in terms of the visual variety of what they wear. And so I really looked into kind of just kind of current trends and different ways we could shape their fashion choices through the film, and also made that a part of the visuals I presented to them. And that's kind of the where I started with that.
So when you are...
Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem.
That's like obnoxious. I don't know why I didn't turn that off.
But so when you get into the filming process and you're working with Eric, your DP, how much was able to come about? I mean, it felt like you guys definitely touched on that social network, which is kind of creepy that he's right behind you.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's like one of the best posters of all time, right?
But how much did it come to fruition with when you were shopping this with Eric? I'm like, okay, we can get these shots.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely, like, that was part of the vocabulary. Like, part of it was just, our work together when we were prepping the film was really developing a shared vocabulary about how we were going to talk about images, because, at the end of the day, it was an independent film, and a lot of stuff was thrown at us once we were in production in terms of locations that we had to shoot at that weren't necessarily perfect in terms of what we envisioned. And so our job in that prep period was really to just kind of share a sense of a vocabulary, and the vocabulary involved a lot of David Fincher's films, that kind of yellowish contemporary noir and high contrast kind of like imagery, the kind of and also kind of very intentional, very severe framing. Eric was watching a lot of Mr. Robot at the time, and he cottoned me onto it, and by watching that show, he was like, advocating, and I completely agreed, for negative space framing, kind of the type of framing that kind of throws the audience into a bit of like kind of using techniques that could throw the audience into a bit of anxiety as they're watching these characters and figuring out who's capable of doing what, and a lot of that has to do with these kind of awkward framing techniques. And so that was part of the language we developed together, and color, certainly. I mean, the color green factors heavily into the film, and we talked about like kind of how to map that out a bit and make it very intentional. With Eric, but specifically also with our production designer and costume designer, were like completely brilliant, Diane Letterman and Teresa Westby. So yeah, color was another element of what we talked about, and yeah, these are all just kind of concepts that we spent weeks talking about before we started shooting, so that by the time we were on set, we just had that language down.
And I love that you guys lead in with it. Those opening shots, even that kind of behind the curtain feel to it is. Yeah. It's beautiful how you reveal slowly Anna. Yeah, well, the character, as she read on the page, Naomi, felt kind of deeply enigmatic, and it took a while to really get to know her. So Eric and I talked a lot about, and Diane talked a lot about how to find locations and shoot in a way that really obstructed our sense of knowing her for as long as possible, visually, whether we were kind of like off her eye line or whether there was literally an element of the architecture that we could shoot her through. There was a great sense of, like, we knew that the story depended on the audience wanting to get to know this character and being withheld from that a little bit. And Anna's the perfect kind of screen presence to bring that naturally, but we wanted to enhance that visually as best we could. What about trying to capture the luxurious side of their living? Like, I love the shots of the plane over the water. That's one of those epic shots. I was like, how did y'all shoot that type of stuff? But also the apartment choices and where they lived. James Purefoy's characters, his whole layout was really intriguing.
Yeah, well, that's the apartment choices are a complete credit to Diane, the production designer, who just knew how on a limited budget to communicate wealth by getting as specific as possible, and also just kind of bring character into those choices in the apartment. Like with James Purefoy's apartment, you have that wall of masks behind the kitchen, those tribal masks, and that kind of like those like little touches that communicate a kind of aggression or a kind of like an aggression. And I guess when it comes to those shots of the planes and the planes that we shot the characters in were all locations and things that the producers were able to get for free or donated just through their kind of network of people, and that really brought an incredible amount of production value. But then there's a good deal of stock footage that we snuck in there as well, but that we were able to get also for free because Bloomberg was a sponsor for the film, and there's so much that Bloomberg did for the film that like elevates its kind of production value that we just wouldn't have been able to afford if they hadn't been on board to be a sponsor. So Bloomberg and some of the producers' connections and yeah, I mean, I think that the production designer's kind of sense of how to get as specific as possible really helped us communicate a lot with a little. Yeah.
Looking at the cast and you're talking about the color. Was there themes for each character, it felt like, or how did that work?
Yeah, there was. I'm trying to think. I mean, like, it's also, it was a year ago. I mean, it was like definitely with Erin, Sarah's character, the presence of green was something that we were looking to kind of continue to grow and build into her character. The kind of closer she gets to crossing the line, from ambition into something something more colored by greed, which is kind of what green represents in a kind of classic Wall Street sense. Anna's character, kind of, we pushed her costume design more towards blue, as she was kind of as a way to kind of like just cool her off, or kind of set her kind of just like that. We just felt like there was something kind of like as she kind of like goes into this place where she needs to kind of liberate herself from the kind of almost confines of where her ambition is taking her. We found blue to be a kind of color that really like kind of let her or communicated some sense of like freeing her from that. And Alicia's character, I mean, we kind of kept her pretty muted and kind of beige and brown tones, but I think as the film goes on, we kind of, and we see her kind of becoming more attracted to the characters and the ideas that she's presented with on Wall Street. We just basically made costume choices for her that imitated the other characters on Wall Street more so. We kind of really separated her visually and color-wise from her environment, or from the environment of Wall Street early on in the film, and we found a way to gradually connect that and make that kind of more of a piece as the film goes on, if that makes sense.
Oh, definitely it showcases too. You do see those arcs kind of click in with the coloring. It's perfect, yeah.
I mean, you have these conversations until you're blue in the face, literally, and then you also have to just kind of get the day done in the can when you're on set. But hopefully, some of that intention comes through.
Can you talk about? I mean, we get to see the stereotypical shots of Wall Street in these shots, but you guys frame them differently. But you also bring in elements that aren't seen in these types of movies, like the pregnancy issues, and then also, you know, the families behind the structure. Alicia's character, her family shots are some of my favorite. Just the bickering with the kids is one of my favorite scenes. How much fun was it to add that to the pacing of this film? Because it doesn't seem like I'll stop. The pacing is wonderful. It doesn't ever seem to slow down when you think it might need to, but it keeps you going. Yeah, I mean, I think so much of that is just a credit to Amy's writing. I think she's just like brilliant on a just scenic level in terms of the dialogue and the way she structures her scenes. They feel very alive, they feel very real, but they also kind of do forward the dramatic kind of intention of the story as a whole. And so I kind of really credit it to her. And the movie's a kind of slow burn, you know. I think it's not typical of a Wall Street movie in that way. It's not high octane and as aggressive as some of the other, I mean, Oliver Stone and Martin Scorsese. I mean, these are kind of filmmakers, obviously, that are the greatest of, you know, of kind of our time or of film history. But the pace of their movies is very different and very fast. And I think our movie is absolutely got its own sense of pacing, but equally kind of equally suspense-driven. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, definitely. Well, I guess to kind of,
I saw that like we're kind of needing to wrap up, and I was like, I could talk about this for a little too long.
Well, do you mind if kind of a final point to touch upon? How much of this film has changed you as a director? Where do you want to see yourself going now that you've been able to film this wonderful, swift, fun film? I mean, I loved making a movie like this, but I also loved making my first movie as a comedy. I mean, my interest is, I'm interested in genre, like kind of any genre, but I'm interested in kind of a reinvention of genre by putting characters that have normally existed in the margins of these stories and bringing them into the center. So in this case, it was a female-driven Wall Street movie. I was very interested in making a Wall Street movie as a genre, but finding a different perspective into it, and that's what I'd continue to seek out, is material that is in genres I'm interested in, but has a fresh perspective on it.